The strategy for surviving in Hamlet is very different to that of Reign of Giants or Shipwrecked. If you think you can have a relaxing time exploring the map, checking out the pig towns and making a nice base, then you're mistaken. Hamlet does not give you a lot of time to get settled, so it helps to know exactly what you need to do before it's too late. There are three main barriers that new players will encounter in Hamlet, and if you can tackle all three, then you should be able to survive indefinitely. The first barrier is the humid season, which starts on day 12, so it's absolutely imperative that you cram as much into the first 11 days as you possibly can. Once the humid season hits, you'll have to put up with the most annoying sanity-draining fog and rabid beetles roaming around the rainforest, making it a lot more difficult to get things done in there. But if you do manage to get through that, the following lush season may be even more difficult if you're not prepared for it. The allergies that kick in will definitely make you go insane both in the game and in real life as you continue to drop all your items from sneezing all the time. The third barrier, being the apocalypse, is definitely the most difficult to overcome, and thankfully you have all the way until day 60 for this to kick in, so you do have a fair bit of time to prepare for it. I'm not going to cover the apocalypse itself in this video, as well as the lush season which starts on day 23, but hopefully by the end of the video you'll be in the best possible position to tackle both of those. And I might end up doing a follow-up video at some point to cover the bits I missed in this video. So we'll start at the beginning as you drop into the world from a crashed hot air balloon. As with Shipwrecked, the wreck itself has some useful materials that are worth salvaging once you get your hands on a hammer, and like normal, the first day or so should be spent gathering the basics, your grass, twigs, logs, flint. Flint can be a bit difficult to find, but if you can find a painted biome, you can often find some flint just lying around on the floor. You should also find some gold, rocks and iron ore in there, all of which you will need early on in the game. I like to make shears as soon as possible so I can get 2 cut grass from the tall grass instead of 1, which essentially cuts your grass gathering time in half. You will need a science machine to craft the shears though. And for those of you that play as WX, don't be afraid to get yourself acquainted with the Thunderbirds here early on. Unlike DST, each lightning strike will give you a full day of 50% speed boost. You will definitely go insane though, so I suggest stacking up on overcharge and then picking a bunch of flowers on your way out. You'll probably also want to have a spear at the ready in case some nightmare creatures want to chase you, and try your best to avoid the gnat swarms as they are annoying as hell and will not leave you alone. Also, this is probably a good time to point out that WX is the undisputed king of Hamlet, and if you're struggling with this game at all, give it a go as WX and I guarantee you will have a much easier time of it. I know I said you should be doing as much as you can in the first 11 days, but make sure to spend the time you need to gather the initial resources. There is nothing worse than needing to stop what you're doing because you ran out of twigs or grass. I'd recommend getting a stack of both if you can, as well as at least 2 stacks of wood. You'll burn through 1 crafting a science machine and alchemy engine alone. Head into any cave clefts you find along the way and mine the stalagmites for gold, flint and gems. This might be a bit tricky to do in the dark, but you can always put a piece of grass on the floor and set it on fire for some temporary light. If you're not WX, that is. By now you're probably reaching the limits of what you can hold in your inventory and are looking for a place to call home. Well, luckily for you, Hamlet comes with a house ready made for you for the low price of 50 oinks. So naturally, we're gonna live outside. Now, in all honesty, I don't really like living in the slanty shanty, mainly because you don't get to choose where it is, and you might end up walking a lot further to get home than you otherwise would. I also find it easier to make money a bit later on in the game, so I don't really want to spend the time now getting oinks when I can do it much quicker later on. So I tend to set up on the outskirts of the city, or maybe even a bit further out if it's in a particularly secluded location. If there are no pogs nearby, build a chest or 2 to store all your stuff. If there are pogs nearby, kill them and then build a chest or 2 to store all your stuff. Seriously, do not get attached to these bastards, they do not deserve any love. And at this point in the game, it's probably worth taking a bit of time to set up a little base of operations. On top of your storage, an alchemy engine, a lightning rod and a drying rack are absolutely fundamental. It's also a good idea to build a crock pot so you can cook some better meals. You will need a bit of charcoal for this, but you can find a bunch lying around in the battlegrounds biome. As soon as you have that set up, you're going to want to get a fly trap stalk or two. So make your way over to the dense rainforest and pick a fight with one of the snap-tooth fly traps. Try to find one that's not surrounded by the baby versions if you can, otherwise you're going to have a lot of fighting on your hands, and time is something that you don't want to be wasting here. These stalks take a full day to dry on the drying rack, so make sure to get it set up as soon as possible. The stalking stick will help you out a lot, especially if you're not playing as our little robot boy. So while that's going on, I like to check out some of the ruins around the world, as they often have things like pig skin, azure feathers, living logs, and you can sell any relics you find for money relatively easily. By now you've probably noticed a few ruinous entrances scattered around the place, and if you're playing as WX you should still have a decent light source, but if not, a torch should do for now. Make sure to bring at least a log suit just in case, as well as the weapon of course, a regular hammer and a ball peen hammer. I find these ruins are relatively tame. You'll probably encounter a few enemies in here, but they'll either be snakes, bats or scorpions. Scorpions can poison you if you try to tank them, so don't do that. If you're really uncomfortable with kiting them, you can even use traps to catch them like you would a rabbit. Obviously the dart traps can be lethal if you're not careful, so make sure to survey the room before you go walking into a trap. Look for creatures that might set off traps as well, and be extra careful when dealing with those. The main reason we're in the ruins here is to collect these lost relics, which is why you'll need the ball peen hammer. Chiseling the statues will set off the dart traps around the room, but if you know the pattern of darts, then you'll be safe every time. You may also notice some suspicious cracks in the walls of some rooms, and there's a chance that a room of goodies lies behind it. Unfortunately, you probably won't have the gunpowder or coconades necessary to blow through the wall at this stage of the game, but if you do find an unimportant pillar in the same room, mining it down will cause an earthquake that has the same effect. Obviously this must be done with a bit of caution, as you could get hit by stuff and enemies can fall out of the rafters as well. If you do manage to get through to the loot room, you'll find some pedestals with some really handy items such as red and blue gems, more relics, dueler-side items, and I even found a lazy explorer in there, so it's definitely worth your trouble taking a look if you can. So by the time you've checked out some rooms, smashed some pots and looted till your heart's content, your drying rack should be done, and it's time to head back to camp to pick up your brand new stalking stick. Sell all your relics in town to the pig professor, who you can find in the academy if you don't see him around town, and it's time to make a quick stop at the general store. There's only really one thing that you need to buy, a miner hat. There is a chance that the shopkeeper isn't stocking it though, in which case you can either come back another day or buy something cheap in the hopes that he'll restock it with the hat. Most of the items in this shop are only a couple of oinks anyway, so while annoying, it's not a big deal. The miner hat will make the ruins a lot easier in the future, especially the ruins that lead to other islands, so it is worth getting. Speaking of which, heading over to the Palace Island is next on the agenda. This trip is a fair bit more dangerous than the last one, so I'd suggest either cooking or buying some health foods like pierogi or waffles, both of which are only 10 oinks at the deli. Make sure you have enough food as well, since there are no food shops where we're going. You should also bring a pair of shears to chop through hanging vines in the ruins. So to get to the island, you'll need to find a ruinous entrance in the dense rainforest, and depending on how lucky you are, this might be fairly easy to find, or it might take you a while. I'd suggest bringing a shovel and using this time to locate and dig up nettle vines that you find, so the time isn't completely wasted. You will need these later on anyway. There are 3 different entrances that you can find in the dense rainforest and one other in the gas rainforest, but the one that we're looking for has a pig statue with a staff on top, so it's pretty easy to recognize. Inside, it's not too dissimilar from the standard ruins we saw before, but there will be more rooms, which means more enemies, more traps, and more loot as well. There's also one special room which we'll need to find, and it's filled with very dangerous traps, but also contains the jeweled truffle. Now it goes without saying that you'll need armor for this room. If you're unlucky, there will also be enemies in there that like to set off the traps for you. If you want to be cautious, you can bring along a few disarming tools made with 2 iron ore and 2 cut reeds and take out the booby traps before they take you out. But once you've got the truffle, if you're still alive, you'll want to make your way to the second exit of the ruins. I don't think there's any way of knowing where it will be, so it's a bit of trial and error, but once you find it, you should be able to exit out into the dense rainforest on the Palace Island. And from there we're heading down to the Palace City. Again, if you find any nettles along the way, make sure to dig them up. We'll replant them together a bit later. Now on this island, you might run into a set piece with some chess pieces, and if you're playing as WX, it might be a good idea to grab a few gears, and you might be in need of them besides. For the humans among us, gears are always nice anyway. You can build an icebox. In the city, sell any relics you found and give the jeweled truffle to Queen Malfalfa. She will give you a royal gallery key, which you can use in the adjacent room to unlock the executive hammer. It might be tempting to get the key to the city, but if you have to pick one, this is the one to get. The hammer allows you to deconstruct pretty much anything in either of the cities and is an invaluable tool for making money and collecting free resources. But obviously the guards will not be pleased to have you smashing down their homes and infrastructure, so for starters, you probably want to find things to break that are more on the outskirts of town and away from watchtowers. Pig houses are a great source of boards, cut stone and pigskin. Any of the decorations will give you a handful of oinks each, so I like to just hammer down a bunch of them and then head into some shops around town. You can buy a tam and moggles from the hat shop, a cutlass from the weapon shop, living logs from the arcane shop, some coconades as well if you have any money left over. There really is some good stuff here. Shame you can't buy more inventory space though. I would also highly recommend hammering down a couple of lampposts in town to get a lantern and some alloy, which we'll be using later on for a sprinkler. Anyway, by now it's probably getting close to the start of the humid season, and you'll want to get back to base before the rabid beetles start spawning in their little cocoons. If you've made it this far, congratulations on making it through probably the most hectic handful of days you will ever get in Hamlet. It's not exactly smooth sailing from here, but there's a lot less that we need to do and more auxiliary stuff that will help in the long run but isn't imperative to do right now. These are things like visiting the other ruins, finding the apocalypse calendar, building up more of a proper base. I normally don't delve into the apocalypse stuff until year 2, or at least until the lush season when it's just a bit less stressful. There are a few little loose ends to tie up before the fog rolls in though. You'll want to plant those nettles in the dense rainforest, preferably close by, and you should plant them near water as well. If you haven't collected many nettle vines, you should probably do that now as well. 20 vines will definitely get you through the lush season with no dramas at all, assuming you collect them when they're ready to harvest. The growth of nettles has been adjusted many times over the course of Hamlet's development and is still quite finicky. Sometimes they'll grow in the humid season on their own, and other times you'll need to set up a sprinkler to get any crop yield at all. So I would plan for the sprinkler just in case. That means getting your hands on a blue gem. If you're lucky, you might already have one from smashing pots in the ruins, otherwise you should be able to get one from BFB's nest later on. You should also make yourself a pith hat with 1 cloth, some vines and 6 cork. You'll probably want an umbrella as well, which you can buy from the general store for 10 oinks if you don't have the silk and pigskin to craft one yourself. Having a house is also not the worst idea for the humid season, as the fog will make you wet regardless of what you're wearing, so sometimes it's nice to just be inside and out of the humidity. A cowl is also a really handy piece of equipment for the coming seasons, as it can let you not only see in the dark but through the fog as well. You do need a basilisk wing to craft one, so depending on your luck with the bat waves and the cave clefts, you may be able to craft one or you may not. It is only a 10% drop after all. As for the humid season itself, there's not a whole lot that needs to be said. It goes without saying that the fog is annoying, the incessant rain is annoying, and the rabid beetles are annoying, but luckily you can avoid or mitigate most of these things. Stay as dry as you can with the umbrella and pith hat, see through the fog with the cowl. You can even build an oscillating fan around your base to cancel out wetness completely. Otherwise, I like to use this time to check out more of the basic ruins, collect some loot from the pots, which is normally helpful. Securing a source of food is also a good idea, whether you want to steal some berry bushes from around town or make your own farms, that's up to you. The only other thing worth mentioning about this season is the BFB. She tends to come around days 16 to 20, so make sure you're ready for that. As long as you let her land somewhere outside of your base and don't get crushed in the process, this is actually a really beneficial encounter. She'll take you back to her nest, which contains a lot of things that you can mine and pick as well, often being a really good source of gems in the early game. In the nest is also an egg which can be nursed and eventually grow into an ugly, squeaky Chester, which can be pretty helpful though, as much as it pains me to admit. On top of that, there is also a regal scepter that can be found on this island, which you can give back to Queen Malfalfa for another key. And if you thought that was enough, on the way back through the cave clefts, you can also find a room with light flowers, which are a great way of refueling your miner hat. There is a chance though that the caves will lead you back to the Palace Island, in which case you'll have to make your way back through the ruins and rainforest again, so try to keep a bit of food or healing on you if you can. Chances are you'll have to run through some beetles on your way home. So yeah, that's about it for the first 20 days. This ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be. I guess it's a testament to just how much is required of you at the start of Hamlet compared to something like Shipwrecked. I hope you guys found this video helpful in some way. If you're new to the game, I hope you try out some of my suggestions and let me know in the comments how you go. Don't be afraid to experiment and see what works for you as well. The beauty of this game is that there are so many different ways of tackling the same problems. But yeah, if you did manage to get through to this point of the video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. It really does make a difference, and share it to someone who needs to get better at Hamlet. Let me know if you would like to see more of these kinds of videos. I mentioned earlier on about making a video of the next 20 days in Hamlet, or something about the apocalypse, so let me know if you'd like that or if there's something else in particular you'd want me to cover. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.